It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the city skyline. Strathmore Industries, a gleaming symbol of modernity and success, stood tall amongst the skyscrapers. The building's glass facade reflected the fiery colors of the setting sun, a perfect match for the empire within, a vast, thriving corporation at the forefront of technology and innovation. The company was legendary for its cutting-edge breakthroughs, and its CEO, William Strathmore, was revered as a genius of industry. The inside of the building buzzed with life as employees rushed to finish their work for the day. The security staff stood vigilant, watching over the streams of executives, engineers, and assistants who passed through the lobby. At the helm of the security team was Ethan Porter, a seasoned guard with a no-nonsense attitude. Ethan had been with Strathmore Industries for years, long enough to feel like he owned the place. Though his job was simply to guard the entrances, he had taken it upon himself to act as a gatekeeper of the company's prestige. Ethan was the kind of man who believed in keeping the wrong sort of people out. He had a sharp eye for anyone he thought didn't fit, those he deemed unworthy of the sleek, polished world within Strathmore's walls. He didn't express these thoughts outright, but his actions told the story clearly enough. That evening, as the workday wound down, the lobby was mostly empty, save for a few stragglers finishing up their tasks. Ethan watched the front door with hawk-like intensity, bored and ready for his shift to end. But then, the door slid open, and a figure entered, a young black man, wearing a simple hoodie and jeans, his hands casually in his pockets and a set of headphones around his neck. James Carter. Tall, fit, with an air of quiet confidence. But he wasn't just anybody. James had worked hard all his life, studying at the best schools, honing his talents in business and technology. He was brilliant, young, ambitious, and, unbeknownst to almost everyone in the company, the son of William Strathmore himself. He had chosen to keep his identity under wraps, not wanting special treatment or attention. He wanted to succeed on his own merits, without riding on his father's coattails, but today, he was supposed to meet with his father in secret, a rare father-son moment amidst the storm of corporate duties. William had asked him to meet after hours to discuss a personal project. And James, as always, respected his father's wishes. As James strolled into the lobby, he paid little attention to the stares he received. He had long grown used to the occasional side-eye when he walked into high-end establishments dressed casually. His mind was focused on the meeting ahead, not on the assumptions of those around him. But Ethan Porter saw him immediately, and his blood began to boil. This man, this stranger, looked completely out of place. His clothes were too casual, his demeanor too relaxed. In Ethan's mind, the young man's presence was a glaring breach of the image Strathmore Industries worked so hard to maintain. Without hesitation, Ethan stepped forward, blocking James's path. His hand rested on the walkie-talkie at his hip, his voice already heavy with suspicion. "Hey! Where do you think you're going?" James, caught off guard, stopped in his tracks and pulled his headphones down. He looked at Ethan with a polite, but puzzled expression. "I have a meeting," James said calmly. "A meeting?" Ethan scoffed, glancing over James's attire. "Not dressed like that, you don't. Who do you think you're meeting with?" James, sensing the tension, kept his voice level. "I'm here to meet with Mr. Strathmore. It's important." Ethan's eyes narrowed. His mind raced with thoughts. Who did this guy think he was, claiming to meet with the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the country? His prejudices whispered to him, reinforcing his assumption that James didn't belong. To Ethan, the story was clear: James must be a liar, or worse, someone trying to scam his way into the building. "You must think I'm stupid," Ethan growled, stepping closer. His hand tightened on the walkie-talkie, his knuckles white. "You're not meeting with Mr. Strathmore, not dressed like some punk off the street. What are you trying to pull here?" James raised his hands in a gesture of peace, trying to de-escalate the situation. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just here for a meeting. If you want, you can call Mr. Strathmore and—" But Ethan cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Enough. I don't need to call anyone. You're not getting past me, you understand? This is private property, and I'm not letting someone like you waltz in here and cause trouble." James frowned, his patience starting to thin. He knew what was happening. He had seen it 100 times before, in stores, restaurants, even on the street. But here, in his father's building, he hadn't expected this level of hostility. "I don't think you understand," James said carefully. "I do have a meeting here. If you just call upstairs," I said. "Enough." Ethan's voice was louder now, echoing through the mostly empty lobby. Several employees had stopped to watch, their eyes wide with curiosity and concern. Ethan was losing control, his anger bubbling over as he reached out and grabbed James by the arm. The sudden contact caught James off guard. He stumbled slightly, but quickly regained his balance. "Hey! There's no need for that," he said, his voice rising in protest. But Ethan wasn't listening. His mind was consumed by his own twisted sense of justice. To him, this was a matter of protecting the company from someone who didn't belong. "You think you can just walk in here and lie to my face? I've dealt with your kind before," Ethan spat, his voice filled with disdain. James tried to pull his arm free, but Ethan's grip tightened. The security guard began forcefully dragging James toward the security office, as if he were a common criminal. The struggle drew even more attention from the remaining employees in the lobby. Whispers and murmurs filled the air as people watched in disbelief. "Just let me go and call Mr. Strathmore," James demanded, his voice now sharp with frustration and pain. His arm throbbed from Ethan's vice-like grip, but he refused to fight back. He knew that doing so would only make the situation worse. "Call Strathmore." Ethan laughed bitterly. "You think I'm gonna bother the CEO with your nonsense? No way. You're going straight to the police." James's heart pounded in his chest. This was spiraling out of control. He didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to reveal his identity in such a dramatic fashion, but Ethan was leaving him no choice. Just as James was about to say something more, the sound of clicking heels echoed through the lobby, cutting through the tension like a knife. A woman in her mid-50s, elegant and poised, walked swiftly toward them. It was Sarah, William Strathmore's executive assistant, who had been expecting James for the meeting. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight before her: James, being manhandled by a security guard, his face twisted with pain. "Ethan, what are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp and authoritative. Ethan paused, his grip loosening just slightly as he turned to face Sarah. "I'm doing my job, ma'am. This guy, he was trying to sneak in. Said he had a meeting with Mr. Strathmore." Sarah's eyes flickered from Ethan to James, and then back to Ethan, her expression darkening with fury. "Let him go. Right now." Ethan blinked, confused. "What? But I said, let him go. Sarah snapped, her voice carrying the weight of authority that came with working for the CEO. Do you have any idea who this is? Ethan, completely thrown off, released James and took a step back, his heart pounding with confusion and fear. This is James Carter, Sarah said, her voice cold. Mr. Strathmore's son. The words seemed to hang in the air, and the entire lobby fell into a stunned silence. Ethan's eyes widened in horror as the realization hit him like a freight train. He had just assaulted the CEO's son. The man he had insulted, grabbed, and humiliated was none other than the heir to the entire company. Oh my God, Ethan stammered, his face draining of color. I didn't know. You thought what? Sarah's voice was cutting, her eyes blazing with anger. You thought because of how he looked, he didn't belong here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, Ethan began, but he was cut off by another voice, one even more powerful than Sarah's. What is going on here? William Strathmore's deep, commanding voice echoed through the lobby. The CEO himself had arrived, his expression a mix of confusion and fury as he took in the scene before him, his son. Standing with his arm bruised, surrounded by a tense crowd of employees, and Ethan looking like a man on the verge of collapse, William's eyes fell on Ethan, then on James. His face darkened with rage as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Ethan, he said, his voice dangerously low, what have you done? I didn't know, sir, Ethan mumbled, his voice trembling. I thought he was a threat. I thought he didn't belong. William's eyes flashed with cold fury. And why would you think that? Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. He didn't have a good reason, not one that he could say aloud. Instead, he stood there, trapped by his own actions, his prejudices laid bare for all to see. William stepped forward, his towering presence making Ethan feel even smaller. You assaulted my son, he said slowly, the words filled with barely contained rage. You judged him without knowing who he was. You disrespected him, and you disrespected me. Ethan's legs felt like jelly. He tried to stammer out an apology, but William cut him off with a wave of his hand. Get out of my building, he said, his voice final and unyielding. You're fired. Effective immediately. The weight of those words crushed Ethan's spirit. His heart sank as he realized the magnitude of what he had done. He had spent years working for Strathmore Industries, and in a matter of minutes, he had thrown it all away. Not because of a mistake, but because of his own deep-seated biases. Ethan tried to plead, his voice shaking. Sir, please, I didn't mean to, get out. William thundered, his voice echoing through the silent lobby. There was no room for negotiation, no space for redemption. Ethan had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. With his head hanging low, Ethan turned and walked toward the exit, the weight of his actions pressing down on him with every step. As he passed through the front doors for the last time, the cold evening air hit him like a slap in the face. He had lost everything, his job, his dignity, and the respect of the man he had sworn to protect. Back inside, the tension in the lobby remained thick, even as Ethan disappeared from sight. William turned to his son, his face softening with concern. James, are you okay? James nodded slowly, rubbing his sore arm. I'm fine, Dad. It's just, I didn't want it to end like this. William sighed heavily, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "I know, son. But I can't allow someone like Ethan to stay here, not after what he did." James looked at his father, his voice quiet. "I get that. But people like him. They need to learn, not just be punished. Firing him doesn't fix the problem. It just pushes it somewhere else." William looked at his son, a mixture of pride and sadness filling his heart. "You're a better man than I am, James. But sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions." James nodded, understanding. But still feeling the heaviness of the day's events, as father and son stood together in the heart of Strathmore Industries, the lessons of the evening lingered in the air, lessons about respect, prejudice, and the cost of assumptions. The skyscraper, once a symbol of power and success, now stood as a reminder of the deeper values that should guide us all, and so, in the quiet of that autumn night, the company stood tall, its walls echoing with the hard-won understanding that true greatness comes not from wealth or power, but from the humility to treat everyone with the respect they deserve.